I thought I knew the shape of my life after 32 years of marriage. Routines carved deep grooves in our days, coffee at 6:30, Gwen reading her book while I checked the warehouse schedules, quiet evenings with the news playing in the background. At 58, I'd grown comfortable with predictability. My job as payroll supervisor at Henderson Logistics wasn't glamorous, but it was steady, methodical work that suited my nature. I liked numbers because they didn't lie. That Tuesday evening in October, everything changed with a simple bouquet of flowers. I was washing dishes when the doorbell rang. Through the kitchen window, I watched Gwen hurry to answer it, her slippers shuffling against the hardwood. Her best friend Marlena Collins stood on our front porch, holding an elaborate arrangement of white roses, baby's breath, and what looked like exotic purple orchids. "Neil," Gwen called. "Look what Marlena brought us." Marlena swept into our kitchen with her usual dramatic flair, her silver hair perfectly styled despite the October wind. At 54, she commanded attention wherever she went, a skill that served her well in her event planning business. She air-kissed Gwen's cheeks and thrust the flowers toward me. "These are for your anniversary next week," Marlena announced, her voice carrying that theatrical tone she used for everything. "I know it's early, but I wanted you two to enjoy them for the full celebration." I accepted the bouquet, noting its weight and the expensive ribbon work. "That's very thoughtful, Marlena. Thank you." "Oh, it's nothing. You know how much I adore you both." She squeezed Gwen's arm. "I have to run. Client dinner downtown, but enjoy those?" After Marlena left, I carried the flowers to the kitchen counter and began searching for our large crystal vase. Gwen hovered nearby, unusually animated. "Aren't they gorgeous?" she said. "Marlena has such exquisite taste." I nodded, carefully arranging the stems. That's when I saw it. A thin black ribbon tucked deep among the white roses, almost hidden by the baby's breath. It was silk, about 6 inches long, with the distinctive texture of a mourning ribbon, the kind used for remembrance ceremonies. My hand stilled. "Gwen, look at this." She glanced over, and her face went pale for just a moment before she laughed, a sound that seemed forced. "Oh, that's probably just a mistake from the florist. You know how busy they get." I pulled the ribbon free, holding it up to the light. It wasn't a mistake. This ribbon had been deliberately placed, carefully tucked where it would only be found by whoever arranged the flowers in a vase. "Why would there be mourning ribbon in anniversary flowers?" I asked. Gwen shrugged, but her smile looked strained. "Who knows? Maybe they mixed up orders. Just throw it away, Neil. No one will ever know." Those words, "no one will ever know," hit me strangely. Why would she phrase it that way? As if the ribbon's presence was a secret to be kept rather than a simple florist's error to be corrected. I placed the ribbon on the counter instead of throwing it away. "I'll call the florist tomorrow. They should know about the mix-up." "Don't bother," Gwen said quickly. "Really, it's not worth the trouble." But I was already studying the small white card nestled among the flowers. In Marlena's distinctive handwriting, it read, "For all the years we lost, M." That phrase bothered me. Years we lost? What years? Gwen and I had been married continuously for over 3 decades. We hadn't lost any years. "What does she mean by years we lost?" I asked. Gwen barely glanced at the card. "Oh, you know Marlena. She's always dramatic. Probably means the years before we all became close friends." That explanation felt thin, but I didn't push. Not yet. Later that evening, while Gwen was in the shower, I found myself studying the ribbon again. I'd handled enough paperwork in my career to recognize when something didn't fit the pattern. This ribbon wasn't an accident. Someone had placed it deliberately, knowing it would be found. I opened our kitchen junk drawer and slipped the ribbon inside, beneath a stack of takeout menus. I couldn't explain why, but I wasn't ready to throw it away. When Gwen came downstairs in her robe, her hair still damp, she glanced at the flowers and then at me. "You didn't throw away that silly ribbon, did you?" "I put it in the drawer," I said, "just in case the florist wants to know about their mistake." Her jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. "Neil, sometimes you overthink things. It's just a ribbon." Maybe she was right. Maybe I was overthinking. But as I watched her avoid eye contact while she made her evening tea, I couldn't shake the feeling that the ribbon meant something. And if it meant something, then Gwen knew what that something was. The next morning, I found myself paying closer attention to details I'd previously ignored, like how Gwen's phone buzzed with a text at 7:15, and how she quickly turned the screen away when I glanced over, or how she'd marked book club on our kitchen calendar for Thursday evening, even though her book club usually met on Wednesdays. Small things, probably meaningless. But after 32 years of marriage, you notice when patterns shift. At work, I found it hard to concentrate on the payroll spreadsheets. My mind kept drifting back to that ribbon, to Marlena's card, to Gwen's nervous laughter. During my lunch break, I decided to drive to Petals and Stems, the florist shop where we'd bought flowers for years. The owner, Mrs. Rydell, was arranging a display of fall mums when I walked in. She smiled warmly. I'd been a regular customer for anniversary bouquets, birthday arrangements, and the occasional apology flowers that marriage sometimes requires. "Neil, how nice to see you. How did Gwen like the anniversary flowers?" I paused. "Anniversary flowers?" "The ones Marlena ordered yesterday. She was very specific about the arrangement. White roses, purple orchids, baby's breath. She said it was for your anniversary." "Marlena ordered them. I thought—" I stopped myself. Gwen had never actually said who'd paid for the flowers, just that Marlena had brought them. "Yes, she came in Monday morning with very detailed instructions. She even brought a sample of ribbon she wanted included." Mrs. Rydell's expression grew puzzled. "Though I have to say, it was an unusual request. Black silk ribbon and anniversary flowers? But she insisted it was meaningful to you and Gwen." My chest tightened. "She brought the ribbon?" "Oh, yes. Said it was from something special you'd all shared. She was quite particular about where it should be placed, tucked deep in the arrangement so it would be a surprise when you put the flowers in a vase." I thanked Mrs. Rydell and left the shop with my head spinning. Marlena hadn't just delivered flowers with a mistaken ribbon. She'd deliberately ordered flowers with a specific black ribbon, knowing I would find it when I arranged them. But why? What was the message supposed to convey? That evening, I decided to do something I'd never done before in our marriage. I went through Gwen's home office while she was at her supposed book club meeting. I felt guilty about it, but the ribbon and Mrs. Rydell's revelation had planted a seed of doubt that I couldn't ignore. If there was an innocent explanation, I'd find it and put my suspicions to rest. Gwen's office was neat and organized, just like the rest of our house. Her desk held the usual items: computer, lamp, a small stack of bills, her reading glasses. But when I opened the top drawer, looking for nothing in particular, I found something that made my hands shake. An antique brass key, ornate and old-fashioned, the kind that might open a safety deposit box or an old filing cabinet. Attached to it was a small yellow sticky note with M&O 1973 written in Gwen's handwriting. M&O. Marlena and who? And why 1973? That was the year before Gwen and I met. I photographed the key and note with my phone, then carefully replaced them exactly where I'd found them. My heart was pounding as I continued searching. In the bottom drawer, I found Gwen's personal calendar. Not the family calendar we kept in the kitchen, but a small leather-bound planner she used for her own appointments. Flipping through the recent pages, I saw multiple entries for book club on various days of the week, sometimes twice in 1 week. Either her book club had become extremely active, or book club was code for something else. I photographed several pages of the calendar, then closed the drawer and left the office exactly as I'd found it. When Gwen came home at 10:30, I was reading in the living room, trying to appear casual. "How was book club?" I asked. "Oh, same as always. We're reading that new bestseller about the woman who disappears." She kissed my forehead. "I'm exhausted. I think I'll go straight to bed." As she headed upstairs, I noticed she was carrying her purse instead of leaving it by the front door like usual. And when I looked out the window, I could see that our neighbor's porch light illuminated her car's hood, which was cold. If she'd just driven home from book club across town, the hood should have been warm. I sat in my chair for a long time that night, staring at the flowers on our kitchen table. The black ribbon was gone from among the stems, but its message lingered. Someone was trying to tell me something, and that someone was Marlena. The question was, what did she want me to know? I couldn't sleep that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw that ribbon, heard Gwen's nervous laugh, remembered the cold hood of her car. At 3 a.m, I gave up and went downstairs to make coffee. The flowers sat on the kitchen table, beautiful and innocent in the dim light. But I knew now they were anything but innocent. They were a message, carefully crafted and deliberately delivered. The question was whether Marlena was warning me about something or threatening me with something. By morning, I'd made a decision. I was going to treat this like any other problem that crossed my desk at work, methodically, systematically, with careful documentation of every fact. At the warehouse, I kept a small notebook where I tracked overtime schedules and payroll anomalies. That Thursday, I started a new section in the back, Home Situation. I wrote down everything I could remember about the previous 2 days, including exact quotes and timestamps. My colleague Preya Banerjee noticed me writing during our morning break. As the HR director, she had a talent for reading people's stress levels. "Everything okay at home, Neil?" she asked, settling into the chair across from me in the break room. Priya and I had worked together for 8 years. She was sharp, discreet, and had helped me navigate several difficult personnel situations. If anyone could give me objective advice, it was her. Hypothetically, I said, if someone suspected their spouse was hiding something, what would you recommend? Her dark eyes grew serious. Hypothetically? Document everything. Dates, times, conversations, inconsistencies. If it turns out to be nothing, you can throw away the documentation. But if it turns out to be something, you have evidence, I finished. Exactly. And Neil? Trust your instincts. After 32 years of marriage, you know when something's off. That afternoon, I decided to visit our daughter Isla at the hospital where she worked as a nurse. I told myself it was just a regular father-daughter lunch, but I was hoping she might have insights into her mother's recent behavior. Isla had Gwen's delicate features, but my practical nature. At 27, she was building a solid career and had always been close to both her parents. If anyone would notice changes in family dynamics, it would be her. We met in the hospital cafeteria, a bustling space filled with medical staff grabbing quick meals between shifts. Isla looked tired. She'd been working extra shifts to save money for a house down payment. "Dad, you look stressed," she said, studying my face with a nurse's trained eye. "Are you feeling okay?" "Just work stuff," I said, then decided to probe gently. "How's your mom been lately? She seems, distracted." Isla picked at her salad thoughtfully. "Actually, yeah. She's been weird the past few weeks. Last Sunday when I came for dinner, she got 3 phone calls and stepped outside to take all of them. Said it was book club stuff, but who plans book club discussions that intensively?" My pulse quickened. "Did you hear any of the conversations?" "Not really, but when she came back in from the 3rd call, she looked upset, and she kept checking her phone during dinner, which you know isn't like her." It wasn't like her. Gwen had always been strict about phones during family time. "Has she mentioned anything about Marlena lately?" I asked. "Marlena's been around more often," Isla said. "She stopped by the house twice last week when I was there visiting. Both times, she and Mom went into the office and closed the door. They were in there for like an hour each time. Secret meetings, phone calls, closed-door conversations. The pattern was becoming clearer, but I still didn't understand what it meant. "Dad, is everything okay between you and Mom?" Isla's voice carried genuine concern. I didn't want to worry her unnecessarily. "We're fine, sweetheart. I'm probably just being paranoid." But as I drove back to work, I knew I wasn't being paranoid. Something was definitely happening, and it involved Gwen, Marlena, and quite possibly other people I didn't know about yet. That evening, I decided to test a theory. When Gwen announced she was going to book club again, on a Thursday, when her regular book club met on Wednesdays, I offered to drive her. "Oh, that's sweet, but unnecessary," she said quickly. "You hate driving downtown at night." "I don't mind. I could pick up groceries while you're at your meeting." "Really, Neil, I'm fine driving myself. Besides, we might go out for drinks afterward, and I don't want you waiting around." Another inconsistency. Gwen rarely drank, and she'd never mentioned post-meeting drinks before. After she left, I did something I'd never imagined myself doing. I drove to the community center where her real book club met on Wednesday nights, just to confirm my suspicions. The parking lot was nearly empty. The building was dark, except for security lights. Whatever Gwen was doing, it wasn't attending book club. I sat in my car for a few minutes, feeling like a private investigator in a bad movie. But I also felt vindicated. My instincts had been right. Gwen was lying to me, and it wasn't about something small. On my way home, I stopped at an ATM to check our account balance. Everything looked normal, but I decided to print a statement covering the past 3 months. If money was involved in whatever was happening, I wanted to track it. Back home, I spread the bank statements across my desk and began looking for patterns. Most of our transactions were routine: mortgage, utilities, groceries, gas. But I found 3 cash withdrawals in the past month that I couldn't account for. $500 each, all taken from ATMs near downtown, $1,500 in cash withdrawals. For what? I photographed the statements and filed them in a folder I labeled Documentation. Priya's advice was proving sound. Having concrete evidence made me feel less like I was losing my mind. When Gwen came home at 11:15, I was reading in bed. She seemed relaxed, almost cheerful. "How was book club?" I asked. "Great discussion tonight. We're really diving deep into the themes." She began changing into her nightgown. "Oh, and I might need to attend an extra meeting next week. The author is doing a virtual Q&A session." Another lie, delivered smoothly and confidently. How long had she been deceiving me, and about what? The next morning, Friday, I made a decision that felt both necessary and slightly crazy. I was going to visit Marlena's event planning office and see if I could learn anything from observing her directly. Marlena's studio was in a converted warehouse in the Arts District, a trendy space with exposed brick and floor-to-ceiling windows. I parked across the street and waited, feeling ridiculous but determined. At 10:30, I saw a man I recognized leaving Marlena's building. Oliver Kessler, a lawyer who'd handled some estate planning for us a few years ago. He was carrying a manila folder and looked pleased with himself. Oliver was in his early 60s, silver-haired, and expensively dressed. He specialized in estate law and had a reputation for being quietly ambitious. What was he doing meeting with Marlena? I waited until he drove away, then walked into Marlena's studio. She was at her desk, looking surprised to see me. "Neil, what a lovely surprise. What brings you downtown?" "I was in the neighborhood and wanted to thank you again for the beautiful flowers," I said, watching her face carefully. "Gwen was so touched." "Oh, it was nothing. I know how much you two mean to each other." Her smile seemed genuine, but there was something guarded in her eyes. "How is dear Gwen? I feel like I haven't talked to her in ages." That was interesting. According to Isla, Marlena had been at our house twice the previous week. She's well, busy with her book club activities. I paused. I ran into Oliver Kessler in the parking lot. I didn't know you two knew each other. Marlena's composure slipped for just a moment. "Oh, Oliver. Yes, he's helping me with some business matters, contracts and such. You know how complicated event planning can be." But Oliver didn't handle business law. He specialized in estates and trusts. "Well, I should let you get back to work," I said. "Thanks again for thinking of us." As I walked back to my car, I felt like I'd learned something important, even though I couldn't quite articulate what it was. Marlena was nervous about something, and Oliver Kessler was involved in whatever was happening. That afternoon, I decided to take a more direct approach. I called Oliver's office and made an appointment to discuss updating our estate planning. His secretary could fit me in the following Monday. Over the weekend, I watched Gwen carefully. She seemed normal on Saturday. We did grocery shopping, had lunch at our usual place, watched a movie together. But on Sunday, she received a text message that made her excuse herself to return a quick call. I followed her quietly and heard her say, "I don't think he suspects anything, but we should be careful." A sudden chill gripped me. They were talking about me. When she came back inside, I was sitting exactly where she'd left me, reading the newspaper as if I hadn't moved. "Everything okay?" I asked casually. "Just Marlena. She's stressed about a big wedding next month." Another lie. And now I was certain that whatever was happening, it was something they believed they needed to hide from me. That night, I updated my documentation with everything I'd observed and learned. The picture was still incomplete, but the outline was becoming clearer. Gwen, Marlena, and Oliver were involved in something together, something that required cash withdrawals, secret meetings, and careful coordination, something that involved me, even though I wasn't supposed to know about it. I stared at the mourning ribbon, which I'd moved from the kitchen drawer to my desk. Someone had wanted me to find it, to start asking questions. The question was, who was trying to warn me, and what were they warning me about? Monday morning, I sat in Oliver Kessler's law office, surrounded by the kind of expensive furniture that whispered about billable hours and retainer fees. Oliver's secretary had offered me coffee in china cups, and classical music played softly from hidden speakers. Oliver entered with his trademark confident smile, extending his hand as if we were old friends rather than client and attorney who'd last spoken 2 years ago. "Neil, good to see you. How are Gwen and Isla?" "They're well, thank you." I settled into the leather chair across from his mahogany desk. I wanted to discuss updating our estate planning, making sure everything's in order. "Very wise. Estate planning should be reviewed regularly." He opened a thick file folder. "Let me pull up your current documents." As he shuffled through papers, I studied his office. Diplomas, awards, photos with local politicians. On his desk, I noticed a small brass key identical to the one I'd found in Gwen's drawer. "Here we are," Oliver said. "Your will was last updated in 2019. Basic provisions, everything to Gwen, then to Isla if Gwen predeceases you. Standard stuff. What about joint accounts, property ownership?" "Currently, your house and primary accounts are jointly owned with right of survivorship. Very straightforward." He leaned back in his chair. "Is there something specific you're concerned about?" I decided to probe gently. "I've been thinking about Isla's future, making sure she's protected if something happens to both Gwen and me." "Excellent thinking. We could set up a trust or add her as a beneficiary to certain accounts." Oliver made notes on a legal pad. "Have you discussed this with Gwen?" "Not yet. I wanted to understand the options first." "Of course, though any major changes would require both your signatures, since most of your assets are jointly held." That was interesting. "All changes require both signatures?" For jointly owned assets, yes, though he paused, as if considering whether to continue. There are some instruments that can be executed individually, depending on how they're structured, such as trust modifications, beneficiary changes on certain accounts, property transfers under specific circumstances. Oliver's tone became more formal, more lawyerly. But these are complex matters that would need careful consideration. I had the distinct feeling he was telling me something without actually telling me anything. I'd like to see all our current documents, I said, just to refresh my memory on what we have in place. Certainly, I can have copies prepared for you. He glanced at his calendar. Shall we schedule a follow-up meeting for next week? That will give you time to review everything and discuss it with Gwen. That sounds perfect. As I prepared to leave, Oliver's phone rang. He glanced at the caller ID, and his expression shifted slightly. I'm sorry, Neil, but I need to take this. My secretary will schedule your follow-up appointment. As I waited for the elevator, I heard Oliver's voice through his partially open door. Yes, everything's proceeding on schedule. The documentation should be ready by Friday. Documentation for what? And ready for whom? Instead of returning directly to work, I decided to make another stop. If Gwen was meeting someone regularly, and if those meetings weren't at the community center, then where were they happening? I drove to the downtown office building where Gwen worked part-time as a bookkeeper for a small accounting firm. She'd had the job for 3 years, mostly to stay busy after Isla moved out. The work was simple, and she could set her own schedule. The building was older but well-maintained, with a small parking garage and a lobby that had been updated sometime in the 1990s. I'd been there a few times to pick up Gwen when her car was being serviced. I found the building superintendent's office in the basement. Felix Ramos was a quiet man in his 30s who seemed to know everything that happened in the building. I'd chatted with him before and found him observant and straightforward. Mr. Adair, how are you? Here to see Mrs. Adair. Actually, Felix, I wanted to ask you about building security. My wife's been working some evening hours lately, and I want to make sure she's safe. Felix nodded seriously. Security's pretty good. We have cameras in the lobby and parking garage, plus I'm usually here until 8 or 9 most nights. Have you seen Gwen working late recently? Oh yes, quite a bit the past few weeks. Usually she's here with that lady friend of hers, the one with the silver hair, and sometimes there's a gentleman with them. My pulse quickened. A gentleman? Older guy, well-dressed, carries a briefcase. They usually go up to Mrs. Adair's office around 7 and stay until 9 or 10. How often has this been happening? Felix thought for a moment. Maybe twice a week for the past month? They seem to be working on some big project. Lots of papers and files. Do you keep logs of after-hours access? Sure do. Building management requires it for insurance purposes. Felix pulled out a thick binder. Want me to check specific dates? If you don't mind. He flipped through pages of handwritten entries. Here we go. Mrs. Adair plus 2 guests, October 3rd, 7:15 p.m. to 9:45 p.m. October 8th, 6:45 p.m. to 10:15 p.m. October 12th, 7 p.m. to 9:30 p.m. The dates match several of Gwen's book club meetings. Felix, this might sound strange, but have you noticed anything unusual about these meetings? Anything that seemed, I don't know, secretive? Felix lowered his voice. Well, I don't like to gossip, but they always ask me to turn off the camera in the hallway outside Mrs. Adair's office. Say they are discussing confidential client information. Is that normal? Not really. Most of the accountants don't mind the cameras. But Mrs. Adair said it was for privacy reasons, and she's always been nice to me, so... He shrugged. Have you seen any of their paperwork, even accidentally? Funny you ask. Last week the gentleman dropped some papers in the lobby. I helped him pick them up, and I couldn't help noticing they had your name on them. Property documents looked like. Property documents with my name on them, being discussed in secret meetings with cameras turned off. Felix, I'm going to ask you a favor, and I'll understand if you say no, but could you keep track of when these meetings happen? And maybe not turn off the cameras next time. Felix studied my face carefully. Mr. Adair, is everything okay? I'm not sure, but I think my wife might be in some kind of trouble, and I'm trying to help her. It wasn't entirely a lie. If Gwen was being manipulated by Marlena and Oliver, she might indeed be in trouble. I can do that, Felix said quietly. I'll keep the cameras running and make detailed notes. But Mr. Adair, be careful. When people start asking for cameras to be turned off, it usually means they're doing something they shouldn't be. I thanked Felix and left the building with my head spinning. Secret meetings with cameras turned off, property documents with my name on them, Oliver's mysterious phone call about documentation being ready by Friday. The pieces were starting to form a picture, and it wasn't a picture I liked. That evening, I sat in my home office and updated my documentation. I now had the mourning ribbon and coded card from Marlena, evidence of Gwen's lies about book club, unexplained cash withdrawals, secret meetings with Marlena and Oliver, property documents being discussed without my knowledge. A brass key hidden in Gwen's desk, I stared at the list, trying to see the pattern. What did Marlena, Oliver, and Gwen have to gain by meeting in secret? What kind of property documents would they need to discuss without my knowledge? And then it hit me, estate planning, property transfers, the brass key that matched the one on Oliver's desk. They were planning to change something about our joint assets, something that required my signature, or something that they thought they could do without my signature. But what? And why? I thought about the mourning ribbon again. Someone had wanted me to discover what was happening. Someone who knew about the secret meetings and wanted to warn me. But who? And how much time did I have before whatever they were planning was finalized? Oliver had said the documentation would be ready by Friday. That gave me 4 days to figure out what they were planning and how to stop it. I opened my laptop and began researching property law, estate planning, and trust modifications. If Oliver thought he could manipulate legal documents without my knowledge, he was about to learn that this payroll supervisor had more fight in him than anyone expected. The mourning ribbon sat on my desk, a small piece of black silk that had started this whole investigation. Someone had sent me a message, and I was finally beginning to understand what it meant. Something was coming apart. The question was whether it was my marriage, my financial security, or simply my misplaced trust in the people I thought I could rely on. By Friday, I intended to have an answer. Tuesday morning, I called in sick to work, the first time I'd used a sick day for anything other than actual illness in over 5 years. I had 3 days to figure out what Marlena, Oliver, and Gwen were planning, and I intended to use every hour. My first stop was the county records office, a gray concrete building that housed decades of property transactions, court filings, and legal documents. If Oliver was preparing paperwork involving our property, there might be preliminary filings or research requests on record. The clerk at the property records desk was a middle-aged woman named Janet, who looked like she'd been working there since the building opened. I explained that I wanted to review any recent activity on my property. "Address?" she asked, fingers poised over her computer keyboard. I gave her our home address and waited while she searched the system. She said, frowning at her screen. "There's been some activity. A title search was requested last month, and there's a pending document for filing." "What kind of document?" "I can't tell you the specifics until it's officially filed, but I can see that it involves a property transfer and was prepared by..." She squinted at the screen. "Oliver Kessler, attorney at law." "A property transfer." My stomach dropped. "When is it scheduled to be filed?" "This Friday, October 20th. 3 days away. Whatever they were planning would become official and legally binding in 3 days. "Ma'am, I'm one of the property owners. Don't I have a right to see documents that affect my property?" Janet looked sympathetic but shook her head. "Not until they're officially filed, but I can tell you that the document requires notarized signatures from all current owners." "All current owners?" "According to our records, the property is currently owned jointly by Neil and Gwen. Any transfer would require both signatures. So they did need my signature, which meant they either had a forged signature or they were planning to trick me into signing something. Is there any way to prevent a document from being filed if I suspect fraud?" "You'd need to file an injunction or fraud claim before the scheduled filing date, but that requires evidence of wrongdoing." Evidence. I needed concrete proof of what they were planning. My next stop was our bank. I'd been a customer for 15 years, and the branch manager, Patricia Selrick, knew me well enough to be helpful without being suspicious. "Neil, how are Gwen and Isla?" "They're well, thanks. Patricia, I need to ask about our joint accounts, specifically what kind of changes can be made without both account holders being present." Patricia's expression grew more formal. "That depends on the type of change. For most modifications, we require both signatures, but there are some exceptions for trust transfers, estate planning, and certain legal instruments." "What kind of legal instruments?" "Power of attorney documents, court orders, properly executed trust agreements." She paused. "Neil, is everything okay? You seem concerned about something." "I'm just trying to understand our options for estate planning. Gwen and I are meeting with our lawyer this week." "Oliver Kessler, right? He's been in here a couple of times recently asking about your accounts." A cold wave washed over me. "He's been here?" "Just general inquiries about account structures and transfer procedures. Nothing unusual for an estate attorney." "But it was unusual. Oliver shouldn't have been asking about our accounts without our knowledge." "Patricia, If someone tried to make unauthorized changes to our accounts, would there be a record? Absolutely. Every inquiry, every attempted transaction, every document review is logged. She looked at me seriously. Neil, if you're worried about unauthorized access, I can put a security hold on your accounts. No changes could be made without both account holders appearing in person with photo ID. Can you do that without Gwen's signature? For security purposes, yes. Either account holder can request a fraud prevention hold. Please do that. And Patricia, can you print me a complete transaction history for the past 6 months? 20 minutes later, I left the bank with a security hold on our accounts and a thick stack of transaction records. I drove to a coffee shop and spread the papers across a corner table. Most of the transactions were routine, but I found several items that caught my attention. The cash withdrawals I'd noticed before were all made on dates that matched Gwen's book club meetings. But more interesting were 3 electronic transfers I hadn't noticed, $2,500 each, moved from our joint savings to an account I didn't recognize. At a $7,500 total transferred to account, number 847-295173. I called the bank's customer service line and asked about the receiving account. After being transferred to 3 different departments, I finally reached someone who could help. That account belongs to Collins Event Planning, the representative told me. The transfers were authorized with proper documentation. Collins Event Planning, Marlena's business. Gwen had been transferring money to Marlena without telling me, but why? And what documentation had been used to authorize the transfers? I was beginning to understand the scope of what was happening. This wasn't just about property transfers or estate planning. Money was already being moved, and I'd been completely unaware. That afternoon, I decided to take a more direct approach. I drove back to Gwen's office building and found Felix in his maintenance office. Mr. Adair, how are you? I've been better, Felix. Did you have a chance to think about what we discussed yesterday? Actually, yes. Felix lowered his voice and gestured for me to sit down. I've been keeping detailed records like you asked, and I found something interesting. He pulled out a manila folder. Your wife and her friends had another meeting last night, but this time I kept the hallway camera running. He showed me several printed screenshots from the security camera. The images were grainy, but clear enough to see Gwen, Marlena, and Oliver entering Gwen's office carrying boxes of files. But here's the interesting part, Felix continued. I also checked the lobby camera from when they left. The next set of photos showed the 3 of them exiting the building. Marlena was carrying a large envelope, and Oliver had a briefcase that looked fuller than when he'd arrived. It looked like they were dividing up paperwork, Felix said, taking copies of documents with them. Felix, I know this is asking a lot, but is there any way to see what they left behind in the office? Felix hesitated. Well, I do have a master key for emergencies, and if you're concerned about your wife's safety, I am concerned. I think she might be in over her head with something. 10 minutes later, we were standing in Gwen's small office. It was neat and organized, just like her home office, but I could see signs of recent activity. File drawers were slightly open, papers were stacked in new arrangements, and there were coffee rings on the desk from multiple cups. In the trash can, I found several crumpled papers. Felix helped me smooth them out on the desk. The first was a draft letter addressed to me. Dear Neil, after much consideration, I have decided to transfer my share of our joint property to a trust for Isla's benefit. This will ensure her financial security while providing certain tax advantages. Oliver has prepared all the necessary paperwork. Your signature is required to finalize the arrangement. The letter was in Gwen's handwriting, but it had been crossed out and rewritten multiple times. Different versions used different justifications, tax advantages, Isla's benefit, estate planning efficiency. The second crumpled paper was more revealing. It was a handwritten note in Marlena's distinctive script. Remember, keep it simple. Tax advantages, Isla's future. Don't mention the business opportunity. Oliver says the trust structure will protect everything if Neil gets suspicious later. Protect everything from what? And what business opportunity? The third paper made my hands shake. It was a photocopy of my signature, taken from some other document, with notes in the margins about pen type and signature characteristics. They were planning to forge my signature. Mr. Adair, are you okay? Felix asked. You look pale. I photographed all 3 documents with my phone, then carefully returned them to the trash can exactly as we'd found them. Felix, I can't thank you enough for your help, but I need to ask you to keep this absolutely confidential until Friday. Of course, but Mr. Adair, what are you going to do? I'm going to stop them, I said, but I need to do it the right way, with proper evidence and legal backup. That evening, I sat in my home office and organized everything I'd learned. The picture was now crystal clear. Gwen, Marlena, and Oliver were planning to transfer my share of our property to a trust that would somehow benefit Marlena's business. They intended to either forge my signature or trick me into signing documents I didn't understand. Money had already been transferred to Marlena's account, probably as payment for her role in the scheme. The mourning ribbon had been a warning. Someone, possibly someone who worked with Oliver or Marlena, had tried to alert me to what was happening. But I still had one major question. Why was Gwen participating in this? What did she have to gain by betraying our 32-year marriage? And I had less than 3 days to figure out how to stop them without destroying what was left of my family. I picked up the mourning ribbon and studied it again. Someone had taken a significant risk to warn me. The least I could do was make sure their warning didn't go to waste. It was time to turn from defense to offense. Wednesday morning, I made a decision that felt both necessary and terrifying. Instead of continuing to gather evidence in secret, I was going to confront Gwen directly. But I was going to do it strategically, with backup plans and documentation ready. First, I called Priya at work and asked if I could use a personal day to handle a family emergency. "Of course," she said. "But Neil, you sound stressed. Is there anything I can do to help?" "Actually, yes. If I needed to prove that someone was planning to forge my signature on legal documents, what kind of evidence would be most convincing?" There was a pause. "That's a very specific question. Are you in legal trouble?" "I think I might be. Or I will be if I don't act quickly." "Okay, listen carefully. You'd need original documents showing intent to forge, samples of your actual signature for comparison, and preferably witness testimony or video evidence. And Neil? If this is as serious as it sounds, you should document everything and consider involving law enforcement." "I'm working on the documentation. Thanks, Priya." Next, I called Isla and asked if she could meet me for lunch. I needed her to understand what was happening in case things went badly with Gwen. We met at a quiet restaurant near the hospital. Isla looked concerned the moment she saw me. "Dad, you look awful. What's going on?" I handed her a folder containing copies of everything I'd discovered: the bank records, the crumpled letters, the security photos, my timeline of events. "I need you to read this," I said. "All of it. And then I need you to tell me if you think I'm losing my mind." Isla read through the documents carefully, her expression growing more serious with each page. When she finished, she looked up at me with tears in her eyes. "Dad, I'm so sorry. I had no idea." "So you think I'm right? This is really happening?" "The evidence is overwhelming, but I can't believe Mom would do this to you. To us." She wiped her eyes. "What are you going to do?" "I'm going to confront her tonight. But Isla, I need you to know that whatever happens, this isn't your fault. And no matter what your mother has done, she's still your mother. And you're still my father. And you don't deserve this." That afternoon, I made one final preparation. I drove to a print shop and made multiple copies of all my evidence. I put one set in a safety deposit box, one set in my office at work, and one set with Priya. If something happened to me, the truth would still be documented. At 6 o'clock, I was waiting in our living room when Gwen came home from work. She seemed surprised to see me. "Neil, you're home early. I thought you were working late tonight." "I took the afternoon off. Gwen, we need to talk." Something in my tone made her freeze. "About what?" "About your meetings with Marlena and Oliver. About the property transfer documents. About the money you've been moving to Marlena's account." The color drained from her face. For a moment, she looked like she might deny everything. Then her shoulders sagged. "How long have you known?" "Since the flowers arrived with the mourning ribbon. Someone was trying to warn me." Gwen sat down heavily in her chair. "I never wanted it to go this far." "Then why did it? Gwen, we've been married for 32 years. Whatever's wrong, we could have worked it out together." She was quiet for a long moment, staring at her hands. When she finally spoke, her voice was barely a whisper. "Marlena said you'd never understand. She said you'd try to stop us." "Stop you from what?" "The investment opportunity, the business partnership." Gwen looked up at me with desperate eyes. "Neil, we could have been rich, really rich. Marlena found this amazing real estate deal, but she needed capital. If we put up our house as collateral, we could have made millions." I stared at her in disbelief. "You were going to risk our home on one of Marlena's schemes?" "It wasn't a scheme. It was a legitimate investment." Oliver verified all the legal details. "Gwen, they were planning to forge my signature. I found the practice copies in your office trash can." Her face crumpled. "That was Oliver's idea. He said it would be easier than trying to convince you. He said we could pay you back with interest before you even noticed." "Pay me back? Gwen, this is our home, our life savings, our security." I know it sounds crazy now, but Marlena made it seem so reasonable. She said we deserved more than just getting by. She said we'd been playing it safe our whole lives while other people got rich. I felt a mixture of anger and pity. Marlena had manipulated Gwen's insecurities, her fear that we weren't successful enough, weren't wealthy enough. What was your part supposed to be? I asked. I was supposed to get you to sign the documents willingly, convince you it was for estate planning, for Idla's benefit, but every time I tried to bring it up, I couldn't go through with it. So you decided forgery was better? I didn't decide anything. Marlena and Oliver decided. They said it was the only way to move forward. Gwen, do you understand that what you've done is fraud? That you could go to prison? She started crying then, deep sobs that shook her whole body. I'm so sorry, Neil. I'm so sorry. I never meant for it to go this far. I wanted to comfort her, but I also wanted to shake her. How could she have been so naive? How could she have trusted Marlena more than her own husband? The documents are supposed to be filed on Friday, I said. How are they planning to get my signature? Oliver said he had a way, something about power of attorney documents and emergency procedures. I didn't understand all the legal details. More forgery, in other words. Oliver had probably prepared fake power of attorney papers to authorize the property transfer. Gwen, I need you to call Marlena and Oliver. Tell them you want out. Tell them to destroy the documents. She shook her head frantically. I can't. Marlena already invested the money I gave her. She said if we back out now, we'll lose everything. What money? The transfers to her account? That was just the beginning. Neil, I took out a second mortgage on the house. Marlena needed more capital for the investment. The room seemed to spin around me. How much? $50,000? $50,000. Our house, which we'd almost finished paying off, was now mortgaged again for $50,000 that had been given to Marlena for a phantom investment. Gwen, there is no investment. This is a con game. Marlena and Oliver are stealing our money and our property. No, that's not true. Marlena showed me the contracts, the property surveys, the profit projections. All fake. Gwen, think about it. If this investment was so good, why did they need our money? Why couldn't they get financing from a bank? For the first time, I saw doubt creep into her eyes. I need to see all the documents they gave you, I said. Everything. 20 minutes later, Gwen had spread dozens of papers across our dining room table. Property surveys, investment contracts, profit projections, partnership agreements. At first glance, they looked professional and legitimate. But I'd spent 30 years reviewing financial documents, and I knew what to look for. The surveys had no official county stamps. The contracts referenced companies that probably didn't exist. The profit projections were based on impossible assumptions. Gwen, these are all fake. Look at this survey. It's dated next month. And this contract references a company called Pacific Northwest Development, but the address is a post office box. She studied the documents with new eyes, and I watched her face change as she began to see what I was seeing. Oh my God, she whispered. What have I done? You've been conned, but it's not too late to fix this. We can stop the property transfer, report the fraud, and maybe recover some of the money. But Marlena is a criminal, Gwen. She's been planning this for months, maybe longer. The mourning ribbon was her mistake. Someone in her network tried to warn me. Gwen looked at me with new understanding. What do we do now? Now we fight back. But Gwen, I need to know, are you with me, or are you still with them? She reached across the table and took my hand. I'm with you. I'm so sorry, Neil. I'm with you. It was a start. But I knew that Marlena and Oliver wouldn't give up easily. They'd invested too much time and effort in this scheme to walk away quietly. The real confrontation was still ahead. Thursday morning, I woke up with a clarity I hadn't felt in weeks. Gwen and I had stayed up until 2 a.m, planning our counterattack. She was genuinely remorseful and ready to help me stop Marlena and Oliver, but I could see the fear in her eyes. She was terrified of the legal consequences of what she'd done. My first call was to Patricia at the bank, confirming that the security hold on our accounts was still in place. My second call was to the county records office, asking about procedures for stopping fraudulent document filings. My third call was to Felix, asking him to document any meetings that happened in Gwen's office that day. But my most important call was to a criminal defense attorney named Elin Rydell, who'd been recommended by Priya. I needed to understand the legal implications of what Gwen had done and what our options were for dealing with Marlena and Oliver. Mr. Adair, based on what you've told me, your wife could potentially face charges for fraud, forgery conspiracy, and money laundering, Elin said during our phone consultation. However, the fact that she's cooperating and that she was clearly manipulated by more experienced criminals will work in her favor. What about Marlena and Oliver? They're facing much more serious charges. Wire fraud, conspiracy, practicing law without proper authorization, if Oliver was involved in forging legal documents. The key is documenting everything and getting them to incriminate themselves. How do we do that? Controlled confrontation with recording devices. But Mr. Adair, this needs to be done carefully and legally. I'd recommend involving law enforcement at this point. That afternoon, I met with Detective Lisa Wexler from the Financial Crimes Unit. She was a sharp woman in her 40s who specialized in investment fraud and elder abuse cases. Mr. Adair, what you're describing is a classic affinity fraud scheme, she said after reviewing my documentation. The perpetrators use existing relationships and trust to convince victims to invest in fake opportunities. Can we stop the property transfer? Absolutely. I'll contact the county records office immediately, and I want to set up a controlled meeting with the suspects. Would your wife be willing to wear a recording device? Gwen was terrified, but she agreed. We spent an hour with Detective Wexler, planning exactly what Gwen would say to get Marlena and Oliver to admit their crimes on tape. The meeting was set for 7 o'clock that evening at Gwen's office. Marlena and Oliver thought they were coming for a final document review before Friday's filing. Instead, they were walking into a trap. At 6:30, Detective Wexler and 2 other officers were positioned in the building's security office, monitoring the recording equipment. Felix had given us full access to the building's surveillance system. I was in a parked car across the street, listening through an earpiece. Gwen was alone in her office when Marlena and Oliver arrived, carrying their usual briefcases and folders. "Gwen, darling, you look nervous," Marlena said as they settled around the small conference table. "Don't worry. After tomorrow, we'll all be rich." "That's what I wanted to talk to you about," Gwen said, following the script we'd rehearsed. "I'm having second thoughts about forging Neil's signature." Oliver's voice was sharp. "It's too late for second thoughts. We've invested too much time and money to back out now." "But what if Neil finds out? What if he presses charges?" "He won't find out," Marlena said confidently. "My contact at the records office will file the documents without question. And even if Neil discovers the transfer later, it will be too late to reverse it." "Explain to me again how the investment works," Gwen said. "I want to make sure I understand." There was a pause. Then Oliver laughed coldly. "Gwen, there is no investment. There never was. We're using your property as collateral to secure a loan, which we'll use to fund our retirement. By the time anyone realizes what happened, Marlena and I will be living comfortably in Costa Rica. But you promised we'd all make money." "We promised you nothing," Marlena snapped. "We offered you a chance to participate in something bigger than your small, boring life. If you were too stupid to ask the right questions, that's your problem." In my earpiece, I heard Gwen's sharp intake of breath. Even though we'd suspected the truth, hearing it stated so bluntly was shocking. "So, you've been lying to me this whole time?" Gwen asked. "We've been managing you," Oliver said. "Like we've managed dozens of other marks over the years. You're not special, Gwen. You're just gullible." "The money I gave you, the $50,000 from the second mortgage." "Already spent," Marlena said cheerfully. "Down payment on a lovely condo in San Jose. You'll never see a penny of it." That was enough. Detective Wexler and her team moved in. I watched from across the street as police officers entered the building. 5 minutes later, they emerged with Marlena and Oliver in handcuffs. Both were shouting, Marlena claiming innocence, Oliver demanding his lawyer. Gwen came out a few minutes later, escorted by Detective Wexler. She looked shaken, but relieved. When she saw me waiting by the car, she ran into my arms and started crying. "I'm so sorry," she sobbed. "I'm so sorry I put us through this." "It's over now," I said, holding her tight. "We'll figure out the rest." The next morning, Friday, I sat in the county records office watching a clerk stamp "Fraud, Do Not File" across Oliver's property transfer documents. The same documents that would have transferred ownership of our home to a shell company controlled by Marlena and Oliver. Detective Wexler had good news and bad news. The good news was that Marlena and Oliver had been charged with multiple felonies and were being held without bail. The bad news was that recovering the $50,000 would take time and might not be possible if they'd already moved the money offshore. "But Mr. Adair," she said, "your wife's cooperation was crucial to building our case. The prosecutor is recommending community service and restitution rather than jail time for her." Over the following weeks, the full scope of Marlena and Oliver's operation became clear. They'd been running similar cons for years, targeting middle-aged couples with modest assets and big dreams. Gwen and I were just their latest victims. The mourning ribbon, it turned out, had been left by Oliver's assistant, a young woman named Maria, who'd grown suspicious of his activities. She'd tried to warn several potential victims, but we were the first to pay attention to her signal. 3 months later, Gwen and I were sitting in a financial counselor's office, working on a plan to rebuild our savings and pay off the second mortgage. It would take years to recover financially, but we would recover. Our marriage was a different story. The trust that had been broken couldn't be rebuilt with payment plans and budget spreadsheets. Gwen had chosen to believe Marlena's promises over 32 years of partnership with me. That betrayal cut deeper than any financial loss. "I don't know if I can forgive this," I told her one evening as we sat in our living room, the same room where she'd confessed everything. "I understand," she said quietly, "but I hope you'll try." 6 months later, Marlena was sentenced to 8 years in federal prison. Oliver got 10 years. The judge called their scheme a calculated assault on the trust that holds families and communities together. Gwen was sentenced to 2 years of community service and ordered to pay restitution to the other victims who'd been identified. She threw herself into the work, volunteering at a financial literacy center and helping other fraud victims navigate the recovery process. As for us, we're still working on it. Some days are better than others. The house is safe, the accounts are secure, and we're slowly rebuilding our financial stability. But trust, once broken, is the hardest thing to repair. I keep the mourning ribbon in my desk drawer as a reminder, not of the betrayal, but of the importance of paying attention to warning signs, of asking questions when something doesn't feel right, of remembering that the people who claim to love you should be the last ones to put you at risk. Sometimes I wonder what would have happened if I'd thrown away that ribbon, if I'd accepted Gwen's explanation and ignored my instincts. We would have lost our home, our savings, our security, everything we'd built together over 3 decades. Instead, we lost something else, the naive belief that love alone is enough to protect a marriage from the world's predators. But we survived, scarred and wiser, but alive and fighting. And sometimes that's enough.